All right. So, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Hoyt. I am a principal evangelist at Kaazing. Kaazing focuses on real-time communications in the web, and so some of this stems from that. Additionally, though, I have a fairly lengthy I've spent 15 years at Adobe, kind of working on the web, and so I have a passion for the web, I have a passion for real time, and I have a passion for the Internet of Things. And I put these things together, and I see different shortcomings in all three of the different kind of angles. And so what I like to do is go around to conferences and talk about those specific shortcomings. Now, this is an interesting conference because it's kind of both IoT and HTML. And so we'll see how this line of thinking goes and what kind of questions we get afterwards. And I know it's the last session of the day, so I'll keep it fairly light and won't spend too much time and won't give a bunch of code, for example, unless you guys want to see code, we can do that too. But it's not designed to be that way. It's designed to be fairly lighthearted, kind of an easy and fun, whimsical walk through effectively what IoT can do for web standards is really the pitch here. I think a lot of times IoT looks at the web and sees it as a tool, as a stepping stone to get onto its bigger and greater self that it will be eventually one day. And I think we have all recognized at this point that IoT is set up to be a very large market. But I think rather than kind of being kind of greedy about it, I think there's things that IoT can do for the web itself to help move it forward. So I want to talk a little bit about where the web is stuck and how IoT can help. First, a little level setting. So before we talk about specific technologies, I'll recount a situation I ran across recently. I'm an Army veteran, and I was going to get use some of my benefits, and in order to do that, you need to interact with the Veterans Administration, the VA. And so I was ready to request my benefits. Well, in order to request my benefits, I needed to print a form and then fax it into them. At some point in the future, they would decide then to put that in the queue and then process it. And eventually, at some point in the future, and of course, I have no visibility into this process whatsoever. I get some sort of response back that says whether or not I completed the form successfully or not, and then we can have another go at the next step. It's a very kind of tedious process, but it reminded me a lot of kind of how the web is today. It's kind of this, we throw requests out there, and might come back quick, it might come back slow, and we get something back, and that's that. And then we can maybe move on to the next step. It's kind of the same thing. And so that scenario of making a request and waiting for it kind of seemingly invisible to the other side, actually is a close analogy. I use Calvin Coolidge here. Calvin Coolidge was the 30th president, but he also was the first person to have his picture faxed. So I thought that was interesting. So these days, however, I think most people would recognize that kind of consumer experience of, hey, yeah, fax me. I have a 10-year-old. She didn't know what a fax was. Of course, she doesn't know what door handles that do this are and things like that. But I think today that consumer experience of throw something out there and fax it and being kind of have no insight to the process at all, and then get something back is really you just don't see that experience today. In fact, if you do see that experience, that is generally considered a poor experience. We're getting to the point now where, and I like to think of user experience as a very important aspect of both the web and Internet of Things, because good user experience leads to successful products, and experience does matter. It's how you perceive something. So you can go to Chuck E. Cheese and have a birthday for your kid, and that's going to be one experience. You can go to Disney and have a birthday with a completely different experience, right? So that experience, it's still a birthday party, but the experience really delineates whether or not you're a Disney or a Chuck E. Cheese. And so I think the same thing can apply here with both the web and IoT. And when you have a fax me, no visibility into the process kind of experience, then that tells you you're dealing with the Chuck E. Cheese. Well, I think more realistically these days, as consumers, we've come to expect a lot more out of that user experience, especially as we've kept more power on our devices. Clearly here with Jeff Bezos and Amazon, I don't know that I want right now drones flying all over the place with packages to drop on me. But I gotta give the guy an applause. He's going for 30-minute delivery, right? I mean, that's, if you think about that user experience, it used to be that you might mail order something, right? I mean, that's not outside of this generation's line of thought. Now it's, click a button and 30 minutes later it's at your door thanks to an automated drone. That is a very liquid user experience, or fluid user experience. And so I think we see Amazon push that forward. And again, that user experience and that kind of instant gratification, if you will, really driving forward both what I think will be the web and IoT. I put this guy on the slide because I was looking up and researching instant gratification, the effect of this type of user experience on people's minds. And it turns out there's actually a lot of study out there as to why the impact of this kind of instant gratification mindset and user experience is bringing about. I'm not going to talk about that, but along my way I found this guy. It was an article in the Boston Globe, of all places, and they picked some guy randomly off the street. Yay for modern journalism! And they picked some guy off the street, and they gave him. They're like, "What do you think? You 23-year-old, and what's your perception?" And he's like, "Well, I've never had to wait for anything. Just some guy with an iPhone that they quoted in the Boston Globe." Okay. But I think his point is valid. I think today's most recent generation just doesn't have to wait for anything. That's beyond them. The idea to think that you would fax something in, I'm not even sure this guy would know what a fax is. Again, to be able to have to fax something in just seems like a huge stretch of the imagination. So the point being here of these kind of series of slides is that we're at a place where the user experience is now. I mean, people want an immediate gratification out of their products, whether it be an IoT product or a web product. And if I have to wait, then I'm going somewhere else, right? We've known that for a long time, but now it's become this critical mass of kind of defining capability of what you can provide to your consumer. So shifting gears into the web, all right? So keep in mind our instant gratification kind of a user experience mindset. Shifting into the web then, we have HTTP. A request response paradigm. And that's not new. It's been around for a really long time now, especially as far as technologies go. It seems like every other day you turn on, you open up your browser and you look for what's going on in the tech world. There's another dozen new frameworks out there. So to have something like HTTP that stands around for so long is really kind of out of the norm. And I think that's because we haven't had that drive, that push to take it to the next level, to make it something more, to do, I think, what we want with it. I mean, we get stuck on this mindset. And I think, Mr. Tim Berners-Lee, I think he makes the point that the future is still so much bigger than the past. It's not even what we envisioned it today. And so I think it's very telling as to what we could do, what the promise and the capability of the web is in the future. And over time, we've kind of glossed over it. We've put new makeup on the pig, or new lipstick on the pig, is what they say, I believe is the phrase. We've made it up with new technologies, or additional technologies rather, to make an old technology that has been around forever look like something new and behave like something somewhat new, but not entirely, right? So when you look at an Ajax, or I've heard people call it Ajax now because they don't like XML anymore, it's all JSON. Whatever your preference, right? But really, we're just still leveraging HTTP behind the scenes. Now the page isn't refreshing, so the user experience, it expects immediate gratification, is a little better, but it's still functionally just the same old request response. Anybody know I think this is an interesting kind of how we got here moment, but Anybody know who the first commercial web application to use Ajax was? No, close though. The first commercial one was Outlook. Microsoft actually brought us HTTP XML, the XML HTTP request object. They brought it to us for the purposes of Outlook on the web. And now we all hate IE, but that's a different story. So when we look at this kind of flow of like dressing up, putting new lipstick on the pig or what have you, especially in technology, you see this all the time in technology, right? When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So I like Patrick here. He says, wait, SpongeBob, we're not cavemen, we have technology. And him and SpongeBob walk over to the computer. They're trying to solve this problem. They walk over to the computer, and then they pick up the computer. They put whatever it is that they're working with underneath it, and they smash the computer down on it. Like that's kind of so it's just, and we see this in technology all the time, right? How do you solve it? Oh well, we use this, of course. Why would we think of something? Why would we try something new? This is proven it works, and we're just going to keep doing this. But yeah, but that's not really the right solution for this. Yeah, but it's proven and it works, and that's what we're going to do. Okay. So yeah, this is a we in technology seem to look at this HTTP. I think is functionally the problem for not for everything again, and that's kind of the important part of this particular train of thought is that the HTTP kind of is the problem when it comes to this user experience bit, especially this intermediate gratification problem. And we keep trying to dress it up and use it in different ways. So now let's switch from, we talked a little bit about instant gratification, okay, and how that's important to the user experience and how your users expect immediate gratification. In fact, they expect so much immediate gratification nowadays that if you don't tell them before they even get there, then you're too late. We talked about the web, and we talked about how the web really, the underlying foundational fabric of the web hasn't really changed much. It's request response. And how related to the world of instant gratification, how kind of antiquated and old that is. But yet it seems to work for everything because that's what we do as developers. We get a hammer and we just like to bang the heck out of everything with that hammer. So now let's switch gears a little bit and go to the IoT side. So if you're getting started in the IoT world, especially if you're a web developer, how many people here are web developers? We classify them as web developers and IoT developers. Okay, and the rest of you are just developers. So that's all right. So I didn't get any hands on the IoT developers, so I get a better sense for where we're at. All right, good. So so if you're coming out from a web developer and you want to build something, right? You might get an Arduino. You might get any other number of platforms. I've seen a number of them here today, actually. And you say, well, cool. I've got this thing, and I've learned to put things together, and now I can make stuff. And that's really great, but now I want to make it an Internet of Things. I don't want to make it just a thing, I want to make an Internet of Things. And so I'm going to put it on the Internet. Well, as a web developer, I have a hammer. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a web server on there. And then I'm going to take that web server and I'm going to be able to ping it. And I'll hit certain IP address on it, and it'll tell me the sensor values. And that's how a web developer is going to kind of approach the IoT world. Conversely, if they don't want to know about the sensor values on the device and the device itself wants to know something about it, they're going to put an HTTP stack and they're going to make a request for some data. And they're going to make a response. They're going to get a response and process that data. And it might even be an XML, which is, on a 16 megahertz processor, is ridiculous. So that doesn't seem illogical at first, right? Well, sure, I want to be able to put data on, put something on that. I want to get some data about it. I'm going to put a web server on it, make it interact with HTTP. And that seems like a no-brainer. The problems that kind of come from that are very difficult to explain unless you kind of walk through the process. So what I wanted to do next is kind of walk you through the process, okay? So I'm going to shift gears here now from kind of going through the slide deck. Let me make sure yeah. So I want to kind of shift gears here now. I'm going to pretend that I represent the widget company, okay? And we at the widget company are proud to introduce, happy to introduce, excited to introduce to you Widget X. That's right. That's right. You can get it here today. It's based on the open source programming stack of Arduino, and it's going to be fantastic. And there'll be a one more thing speech later on, and we'll all be happy. So we have introduced you to the widget. Now, outside of the, just kind of back into the, this is going to be an interesting kind of back and forth. This is just an Arduino, and I'm kind of approaching this as though we're going to be doing a traditional web developer approach to IoT. Okay, so there's our brand new widget X. It's an LED. Pretty exciting stuff. So I'm going to go ahead, because I don't like to rely on conference wireless for this. I'm going to use kind of a shim here to kind of make this a little easier. Let's do this. And that one's going to have 5. And that one's not available yet. All right. Supposed to have both of these in there. All right, so we'll go to my browser, and because I've got this web server that I put on it, now it can handle responses. I can say, hey, what's the status of the LED? Oh, the LED is off. Sweet. And I can, and it seems to make sense. Right? URLs and URIs, they tend to make sense. I have a resource. It has an address. I'm going to address the address, and that's going to change things. And so I can go ahead and turn it on, and oh, yay, I have light. It's fantastic. It's magical. That's right. That's widget X. Boom, H0, and it goes off, right? So that's widget X. And then, of course, if we're going to mask the URLs, we use our Ajax, because that's the new lipstick on the pig. So that's the way we're going to go. And again, I don't have anything against Ajax. I have a problem when people have a hammer and look at everything as a nail to be hit on. But we're going to go ahead and go to our widget X webpage here with a button, right? And don't worry, this is mobile friendly. You can run this on your mobile device. So, when I push the button, an Ajax call, right? JavaScript calls use XML. XML HTTP object to make a request to that web server. The web server is going to route that off to the electronics, and things are going to happen. So I push the button, and the light comes on, and I release the button, and the light goes off. It's magic. It's magic. It's true. It's true. So, yeah. So there's widget X. We at the widget company. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if that's a please be over now or no. So we at the widget company have heard that you consumers would like more. So I give to you Michael Scott. Michael says, make friends first, make sales second, and make love third in no particular order. I think we at the widget company, we've made a lot of good friends in the new customers. Of course, sales are skyrocketing. So, and obviously people love widget X because they can control the LED with their phone, and that's amazing. So we have decided then to introduce today widget Y. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I give you widget Y. Also Arduino based. This fantastic new technology will allow you to sense the light levels in your ambient space. In lay terms, it's a photocell. Widget Y. Yes. So let me go ahead and we've got the LEDs on 5, we've got photocells on 6. Fantastic. So now, as before, because we've got a web server, I can go to the photocell, and it says the light value is 706. Now, to give you an idea, this is a reference here. This particular photocell is wired up to give me a range between about 1,100 absolute tops, like sun bearing down on it, to about 0, which is pitch black, okay? So it's 706 right about now in the ambient light in this room. And just to prove that, I can go ahead and cover it up with my palm here, and then I'll go ahead and refresh the page. and this is 3, okay? So, widget Y. Now, of course, we couldn't just deliver that. We have to have a web page for it. So, bring on widget Y. That's fantastic. How exciting. We can show you the light levels in your space. And I can put my palm over it, and again, it will drop. And I take my hand off of it, and it'll go back up. Great. Now, remember we were talking about instant gratification? Wow. Okay. So this represents a problem. Because we're using HTTP, what's happening here is I have an interval set up every 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. It makes a request to the web server, gets some data back about the photocell, and then renders that on the page. Okay. Now I could go faster, I suppose, right? I mean, I could make Ajax requests every half second, because, and I cringe because this is a 16 megahertz processor, and I'm not sure it's really designed to handle sub-second HTTP requests and a web server. It doesn't even have, it has, this is almost 0 RAM, just enough RAM to hold the program, really. This is going to represent a problem if I'm going to try to get this to scale. And also, it turns out that Widget X, in all its greatness, it got us started as the widget company, it doesn't know anything about Widget Y, and Widget Y doesn't know anything about it. Widget X. And why would they? They have separate URLs. That's how we do things. We have HTTP, and we have URLs, and we point things to that URL, and things happen, and they're completely oblivious of each other. So it turns out that web standards have evolved, and there's something called WebSocket, and WebSocket gives us real-time support. And so if we shift gears here, and I put a little Easter egg here for me to be able to play around with this. If we shift gears here and say, I want to use WebSocket instead, so now I've turned on WebSocket. I put my hand over it. Oh, well, that's a little more responsive. That's a little more instant gratification. Actually, it turns out I've actually still throttled the hardware. I've told it to turn down. If I take this up another notch, right, this is the real response of my hardware. Okay? Difference? If you're a consumer who's baked on the idea of instant gratification, you've lived your whole life growing up thinking about instant gratification and being gratified like that, which experience is going to sell your IoT product? Okay? Now again, keep in mind, I'm not saying that everything needs to be WebSocket, but I am proposing that when we want to show off the best part of our hardware, that we use the right technology for the job. And I think WebSocket in this case fits great. Again, I think the speed difference here. So we'll turn on WebSocket and then I'll unthrottle it. Right? And I mean, just the difference is mind-numbing almost. It's just so fast. It's so fluid. So moving to WebSocket at the widget company has been a great big success for us. Now, of course, now we're running WebSocket servers on everything instead of web servers because that's what we do. We run servers on things. And it turns out that's not going to work out really well for us either because as we continue to add products to this, and I'm out of USB ports, sorry. As we continue to add products to this, that's going to create a bit of a problem because again, widget X and widget Y don't know anything about one another. Well, WebSocket's a good first start, but it actually harkens forth another idea that's been long since existed and been around for a long time, which is message-oriented middleware. So if you have WebSocket and you can do real-time data, what you can do is just wait for it. Just wait for it to arrive. And that's functionally what happens when the photocell in widget Y sends off its data. It gets to the web page and the web page renders it. It just sits there and waits for the data to arrive and it does whatever it needs to do. And that's so instant, you can't even almost tell the difference when I put my hand over it. It's so fast. You don't get to see it go down and up. It just so when we go to a message-oriented middleware, we can actually decouple things. Rather than having them run web servers, which are really heavy, or WebSocket servers, which are really heavy, we just have them open a connection to a message broker in the cloud, if you will. So they open up a connection, and it goes to a centralized system, and they just sit there on that connection. And then the cool thing about that then is that widget Y can say, oh, here's a light value, here's a light value, here's a light value, right? And so when we go to that point, we say, here's a light value. It doesn't know who's out there expecting that, but it goes off to the message broker, and then the message broker distributes that message to all the other connected clients because we have a connection. It's WebSocket. We have a socket connection. It goes off to all the other web clients, and one of them says, "Oh, I'm interested in messages around light values. Sure, I'll take that," and it does something with it. And all of a sudden, we have a world in which IoT can really kind of start to raise to the next level. This widget X, widget I idea, or widget Y idea. This isn't IoT. This is IoT for me is when these guys can start cross-talking, especially when they're not made by the same vendor. That's especially important because then we really start to reach a whole other level of what these machines and all these processors and this open network are becoming more capable of doing. The value that they can provide to us then is exponentially greater than the value that they can provide as their own individuals. And so I think that's what we're looking for, is a way to get more broadly aware IoT devices. That's kind of the next big phase, rather than just being kind of, Philips announces you can control the color of your LED by your cool app, or, Quickset says you can control the front door of your lock, with our app, and Masterlift says you can control the garage door with. Great, now I've got like 6 apps to work around my house. This is horrible. It should be elevated. These guys shouldn't have to know about each other. Garage door should just be listening for messages, right? Is there a garage door message out there? Oh, yeah, there is. Okay, great. Let's do that. Right. So obviously there are economical, business, political reasons that is a very big challenge. But I think as we reach to drive IoT forward, that becomes a very big consideration. Now, in this case, having moved to a broker, so I've got it throttled still, but and as you can tell, it's a little right, but it's effectively what's happening now is that widget Y is sending messages to a message broker. Widget X, our light, is listening for those for messages around light values, and so as and I don't know how it'll work in here. We'll see. Brighter, dimmer, brighter, dimmer, right? So as I cover up the photocell, that is, say it's getting dark and I need more light, the LED is listening for light values, and then it goes ahead and picks that up. It knows nothing about where this guy is, what network it's on. It has no idea what microcontroller is in it or what a programming language it's written in. It doesn't know anything about these, and vice versa. This guy knows nothing about that guy. They're completely decoupled because we'll be able to take that socket technology, take it to the next level, and use a message-oriented middleware to decouple these guys so they can communicate strictly by listening for the right messages. And so again, we'll cover it. It gets really bright. Take my hand off of it, it gets really dim. And if we take that throttle off, so now it should happen almost instantaneously. It's a little more fluid that way. It's hard to do in this low light level. Works much better on my sunny deck. But so there we go. So that's am I still running really high? No, okay. So when we decouple those things, we can really create a much better experience, not only from the speed of things because we're waiting for messages or sending messages, but also from the capability for those devices to interact. So as we go back into the slides here real quick, I'll just put that first slide up again. All right, when we think about the internet and the Internet of Things, and I think right now everybody's in this kind of gold rush mindset of just rushing to get a thing out there. But if we stop and think about the capabilities for these devices and what they could be capable of doing and delivering the value that they could be delivering for us as humans, and we reach for something bigger and greater with some of these standards that are out there, like MQTT or MQTT, and other like all seen, all join, was reach out for these broader standards that allow interoperability to happen. And we really reach out for taking our IoT to the next level. And along the way, we push the web into the next level by doing that. We move away from HTTP where it's not really necessary, where it doesn't really work out for us. We move to a WebSocket, to a real-time world, to an event-driven world, which one that is capable of handling an instant gratification mindset. And so when we look at the internet and we have our things, we shouldn't really be asking what the internet can do for our thing, rather we should be asking what the thing can do for the internet. I think IoT, the reason we haven't moved from HTTP in so long is because there really hasn't been any kind of giant need to do that. But I think IoT creates that need. It can be the catalyst that creates that need if we take it and stop looking at IoT as something that can greedily grab from the web and do whatever it wants with, and think of it as what it can bring to the web. And if we take that mindset and we say, well, now we can have web standards that do something a lot more. And I'll try one more demo. This is my repeat performance for those of you who saw me this morning, but go ahead and try this one real quick. This is always a little sketchy, so we'll see what happens. So if you think about the differences in how APIs would look on the web, right? Think about not that OAuth is bad, but think about all the pains that people have to go through for OAuth. And you're making a basic request and you're getting a response back from the server. Imagine, if you have a travel app. I flew here. If you have a travel app and it shows you where the plane is, or what the expected departure date, departure and arrival times are, right? And it does that because it refreshes, right? It requests. It doesn't do it in the foreground, but it does in the background. It requests and response for that data. Why couldn't that data be real time? Imagine if our APIs, instead of being built around request response, were built for real time. Right? Rather than saying request this endpoint to get this value, what if I said send me messages for this? And we can do that on the web. The technology exists. This isn't a pipe dream. It just needs something to make that want to happen. And I think that the IoT can be that something. I appreciate you indulging me here while I see if I can get this guy triggered in here. Yes. So this is another thing for us to enjoy. I'll do this. You can, if you want to, on your device, go to this URL, kevinhoyt.com/project/tic-tac-toe. That's this guy. And this guy has an Arduino Yun in it. A Yun is I'm a big fan of the Yun, and I'm a big fan of the Yun because its wireless approach is one of the easiest to get onto. If you're coming from the web world, it's one of the easiest to get onto. And I also really like it because it's independently thinking. It doesn't have, so for example, let me give you a compare and contrast. It doesn't have like Spark.io, Spark cores are another player, Electric Imps are other players in the market, but all Pinocchio's another one. There's a lot of these little chipsets that are coming on board that are wired, and they are designed to work with HTTP. Effectively, they're asking, what can I get from the internet? Not where can I take it, where can I push it, where can I help people? They're really asking, what can I get from it? And they're all designed for request response. None of them support messaging. In fact, if you wanted them to support messaging, you're just hosed. So there's no real time. So I like the Arduino Yun because it's like, hey, here's a wireless client. You can do whatever you want with it. And so that's exactly what I've done. Some of you are starting to interact with the device. He just sits out there and he listens for messages. And it turns out anybody who's using the device, your device also is listening for those messages, just using a web browser, as is my device now listening for those messages. And so you can actually control the color of the squares individually. Again, so I want to just kind of as an endpoint to show that this isn't a pipe dream. This isn't some fantasy. Where WebSockets exist, they're plenty capable. They're in modern browsers, and if they're not, by the way, I work for Kaazing, but we have a capability to give you messaging support without, even if the browsers don't have that yet. But yeah, so there's this. So messaging isn't some really weird kind of out there tangent thing. This thing that we can use today. We just need to take our minds off of using that hammer to smash HTTP into everything and think about what we can do next. So that is my version of IoT in the new web. Thank you. So obviously I have some time left over for any questions. Any questions around this stuff? What kind of high visionary stuff? Should be some good questions. Yeah.
So why the broker? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Why not more peer-to-peer?
Yeah, peer-to-peer could go well. So the question is why a broker? Why not peer-to-peer? So I use the broker because the standards are better established for it than a peer-to-peer environment are. I think peer-to-peer can certainly be another tool in our tool and the IoT kit down the road. But as connectivity goes, WebSocket and sockets in general, message brokers are far more established at this point. So that's why I've chosen to go that route. And available more broadly in the web than WebRTC is as well. Yeah. You had a question as well. Yeah, yeah. I think you can go to like Can I Use and you can figure out exactly which browsers are. But it's been around for a while. Yeah. So support for WebSocket is kind of the general question, I think. And if you're just coding to WebSocket, that can be true. We at Kaazing have the capability to provide you that feature even if it doesn't exist, which is really fun actually. So that's why I don't worry about telling everybody to try this because I know it's going to work. Yes, in the back. Oh, so this guy is connected to the Wi-Fi. When you guys are communicating to it, you're communicating to it over internet. He's plugged into the USB strictly for power. Yeah, I meant to bring I have a separate thing, but the extension cord isn't long, so it's kind of tricky. The logistics of a conference event to kind of have its own little power cord and hitting off the side is so tricky. But yeah, this is just using power. And at the core, my widget X and widget Y, they're plugged in via USB, and I'm using that to kind of channel stuff around. But functionally, built on a Yun, they would all they would need is power. Right, so yeah. Yes.
I wonder if you could show some of the code behind like all the messaging.
Some of the code behind messaging, I'd be happy to. Let me make sure there's no other kind of easier to answer questions. Yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
So it's like SOAP and WSDL, right?
Yeah.
Proposing something similar so we can discover devices?
Wow, that is, yes. So, yeah, so in the world of web services, in the traditional web services stack, you have discovery, UDDI for discovery, or WSDL to be able to do discovery on a specific service once you found it. Right, these are fantastic concepts that absolutely should be applied to IoT. Absolutely. I think to get there, though, again, we have to stop being greedy and asking what the internet can do for us. Right, we have to say, what can we do to further the purpose? And I don't know. Yeah, we'll see how fast that comes. But yes, absolutely. I think discovery is the next big challenge for IoT. Yeah. I wouldn't call any out as drivers right now. The closest I think I would maybe get is IBM, maybe. I worry about their vested interest a little bit on that, but I think they've been, because I mean, enterprise and discovery is big business for them as it is. So I think they're they've been heavy players in IoT for a while now. I think that if anybody has a good chance of taking lead on that, it would be an IBM. I would just worry about their interests. Yes.
So you mentioned that HTTP and XML or JSON as well probably is the most efficient way to communicate with these devices. But it does have the advantage that there's a lot of familiarity there, and it can bring a lot of, say, like developers into the physical world. Do you think the familiarity argument holds true,
Well, so I've taught IoT courses all around the world to professionals and high school kids all the way through different levels. And so in my experience, familiarity in an educational setting trumps everything. I want them to be as close to whatever it is that they're used to as possible. And interestingly enough, in various parts of the world, that means different things. And so, rather than, so I think, so if JavaScript is something that's going to be familiar to onboarding a specific audience, then yeah, by all means, it should be the option you go with, and there's no reason you can't. Tessel, for example, is a great example of trying to do that. I think the Canoma Create is another one. So there are products on the market trying to help educate people around IoT and hardware by using JavaScript, and that's great. I think the problem stems when we think of, well, it should all just be JavaScript. But that's not true, because as I've said, I've found in different places of the world that that's not always the lowest common denominator. So we should be willing to adapt and use different technologies for whatever it might be, whatever our purposes might be. Yes?
I have a question on bridging the old and the new. I can understand a lot of these concepts for quote-unquote greenfield environments, far
Right.
easier to do.
Right.
Maybe connected on a good place, it's controlled. But what are your ideas on bringing the enterprise to the new world? We have a lot of stuff already.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I think some enterprises are more aggressive and more, open to adopt new technologies and move forward and kind of push that path forward. Others are not. I think it depends on the industry. We see a lot of uptake in this type of technology from in the finance world, for example. We see some both. I mean, you see there's the obvious use cases like the capability to do real-time, stock trading and things like that. But there's also some of the kind of fewer more recently hedge stuff would be like mobile payments, and payments processing and things like that. It can also be real-time. I'm absolutely floored that the commercial aviation industry hasn't gotten on this yet. Right? I mean, you stand at the board. Is it updated? Is it tick, 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 it's refreshing? I mean, that's horrible. That's a horrible user experience. And let's not forget that they're losing commercial airliners. Like, it's 2014. How do we lose commercial airliners? That shouldn't happen. We should be able to have real-time telemetry back at the data center, and then the impact that would have moving forward into the rest of the apps in the world that are using that data would be fantastic. So I'm really shocked that they're not on it yet. Healthcare is moving that way because processing healthcare data late is a bad thing, right? Guess what? You had a heart attack. Well, thanks. Right? I want to know that my cardiac diagnosis is changing, and I want to know. Right? I want to know that now. I want to know it before it happens, if at all possible. Right? So healthcare is slowly starting. I think is another kind of interestingly enough early adopter. The enterprise that I've seen, in the vertical and the enterprise I've seen most aggressive on adopting this, surprisingly enough, is sports and entertainment. Right? And be able to interact with the TV or get real-time statistics on whatever device it is you might be interested in while they're playing the game. Those types of things have been really popular. So I think it varies on enterprises. Some of them are more stodgy and take more time. Others are more aggressive and push forward. And I think, and again, I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that everything should be WebSocket, right? There are use cases for HTTP, and then by all means, enterprises with those use cases should stick to that technology that works best for them. Yeah. Yeah, and again, so that's another great example of hammer and nail. We're going to be very careful of that, right? So if we're talking about running off of a battery, you're going to get a heck of a lot more life from a socket listening to a port versus a web server running on that CPU, right? So if you're talking about like an apples to apples, as close as you can, then you're gonna get much better long-term battery life out of just listening. Just open the socket and just stay listening, versus running a server or pinging repeatedly, right? And so because of those little processors processing strings that we're going to send across as HTTP, like the whole HTTP header is built on strings. that takes a lot of processing out of these little cores. And so, yeah, that represents a big problem. And the way that you see people getting around it today, which is mind-blowing to me, is something like the Galileo, right? So let's throw a gigahertz processor at it. That's going to do great for our battery life of our things, right? Difference? If you're a consumer who's baked on the idea of instant gratification, you've lived your whole life growing up thinking about instant gratification and being gratified like that, which experience is going to sell your IoT product? Okay? Now again, keep in mind, I'm not saying that everything needs to be WebSocket, but I am proposing that when we want to show off the best part of our hardware, that we use the right technology for the job. And I think WebSocket in this case fits great. Again, I think the speed difference here. So we'll turn on WebSocket and then I'll unthrottle it, right? And I mean, just the difference is mind-numbing almost. It's just so fast. It's so fluid. So moving to WebSocket at the widget company has been a great big success for us. Now, of course, now we're running WebSocket servers on everything instead of web servers because that's what we do. We run servers on things. And it turns out that's not going to work out really well for us either because we continue to add products to this, and I'm out of USB ports, sorry. As we continue to add products to this, that's going to create a bit of a problem because again, widget X and widget...
And my question is, that depends on, obviously not just the low-level protocols and formats, but things like having a common semantic vocabulary and terminology for agreeing on what you call things and what the important kinds of information are and things like that. So that if you have a sensor that monitors your yard for moisture to turn on sprinklers, it doesn't. Like in our example here, like if all it does is wait for a I'm wet event to turn things off, then your washing machine reports that it's wet and then it turns the sprinklers off in your yard.
Yep, yep.
So obviously it needs to know that it's listening to only a particular kind of moisture using event.
Yep.
So one question is how much work is being done on all of that kind of problem with the whole information structure and managing that around this?
Well, so
Or conversely, is everybody still working at the level of we're going to make our own proprietary devices and they all talk to each other in really hard-coded ways? And
almost 100%, that's the scenario.
kind of expect,
Yeah.
I just wondered, if
And in the home automation front, at least, since it was brought up earlier, you start to see interesting solutions popping up around that problem. You find home automation hubs, right, that have 6 different radios in them, and you can work with those APIs to adapt to any different type of incoming technology. And then the hub manufacturers, right, they work with Kwikset and Masterlift and GE and to have those APIs available to their radios and things like that. I think when that's a hedge, I think long term it should be much bigger vision than that. But yeah, almost everybody today is all about the proprietary make me money approach of it. Yeah.
The second question is, I'm curious how much is being done on the security of these micro networks.
Yeah.
Particularly security of some of the lower power nodes that don't have a lot of processing power to spend a whole lot of it on security-related issues.
Yeah.
You can hack into a sensor and either use that as a vector to get into another part of the system, or else just use the sensor itself to flood invalid readings or something like that.
Yeah.
How much effort is being spent in that area?
I don't want to. So I've seen some. Surprisingly, I've seen a few. They make custom IC integrated circuits that do real quick cryptography on stuff, and so I've seen some ICs in the market that are specifically targeted for securing the data that goes across the wire. I've seen a few companies pick them up and integrate them into their hardware. I think that also begs the question, kind of further down the line though, is when you get is beyond the data coming off of the node and into the from the web into my intranet, like in a healthcare situation, right? How do we get through the firewall, and what is the security at the firewall and things like that? Also interesting problems to solve that I've seen some work on, but not a whole lot. All right, so that's my time. There was some people wanted to see some code, so if you still want to see some code, I'm the last session, so I get to show off if you want. Yeah, so at this point, thank you for attending. Yes, thanks.